This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of Michelob Ultra Beer.
They say consistency is the key to success. They weren't wrong. So how about grabbing a beer that's consistently smooth, consistently refreshing, and consistently light? You might just find that the road to success can be pretty enjoyable. Michelob Ultra, the perfect balance of taste and refreshment, and only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Welcome, everyone, to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is the podcast and the radio show bringing you the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace trends shaping the workplace and the workforce and the marketplace around you with a focus on Alabama business. Our goal is to find people that have insights and ideas that in our interview with them, they give us something that we can do to make each of us a little bit better. Again, thank you very much for joining us and welcome. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. There was an extraordinary amount of conversation as COVID was hitting, and the office leaders were sending the employees home of what was going to happen to all this office space. Will we ever return to the office space of old where people come to work every day and show up in a cube or an office, etc.? Now that we've sent them home, are they ever going to come back? Is the workplace, the real estate specifically, that has housed the working spaces of this country for so dang long, is it ever going to come back, or are we now permanently work at home? And we're muddling through those answers today. We see some places completely coming back to work. We see others that they'll never come back to work. I myself have a client out in Pasadena, California, all engineers. And the CEO of this company, it's a publicly traded company, said, our performance at work from home was far and above and beyond what it was in the office. He said, I'd be a fool. I would be neglecting the needs of the shareholders if I told everybody to return back to work, considering how high productivity was when people were working from home. There are others that the employer says, in order for us to be a fully functioning team, we got to get everybody back. And there are those that I tend to agree with those that say our company is based, or succeeds rather, on the culture we've developed in our workplace. And the only way to perpetuate and maintain that culture is to look one another in the eye. So there's a lot of different, and I'm learning also that whether people are returning to the workplace or not is often very dependent upon market size. How big is the city? And the bigger the city, the less they're returning to the workplace. This episode is going to be talking about workplace, workforce, office space. What's going to happen now that we're in the post-COVID world with all this office space? Is there going to be a surplus of office space? Is that a myth? Is that a misnomer, etc.? We're going to talk to James Lomax. James is going to tell us what's going on in the Huntsville market. It's perhaps one of the more sophisticated office leasing environments in the nation right now, or certainly in the state of Alabama, with the rapidly developing and growing world that Huntsville is. James has got his finger on the pulse, and I feel like what's going on in Huntsville will ultimately wind up in the remaining markets of the state. We're going to finish the show off talking with Johnny Gwinn and Stacy Wellborn, who are co-owners of the Container Yard in Mobile. It's a co-working space that I record all of my shows in. Johnny is the guy on the knobs and the dials and helps me with the recording. But their popularity of the co-working space has risen post-COVID, and we're going to learn about why. It's very much an in-demand space here in Mobile as well as across the state. Got a lot of stuff for you today. We're talking about office space, state of Alabama, looking at Huntsville, and then co-working space. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be back after this break. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, University of Alabama.
Think about how people really see you. The kid at the drive-thru just sees a coffee drinker.
Please pull forward.
Your local barista sees the person who loves a smiley face in their latte.
See you next time.
It's kind of the same way with insurance. Other insurance companies just see a customer, but a State Farm agent sees more. They see you as a neighbor. Your State Farm agent is here to get to know who you really are, so they can help life go right.
Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, and Mobile at 666-1616.
We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. On the phone today, James Lomax, Vice President, Asset Management and Leasing. He is with a company called COPT, the Corporate Office Properties Trust. They're a real estate REIT. His office is in Huntsville. According to his bio, he's responsible for overseeing growth and asset performance of COPT's portfolio in Huntsville, consisting of 460-acre master-planned mixed-use EUL project known as Redstone Gateway. Overall portfolio consists currently of over 2 million square feet of Class A office and retail space. James, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Hey, Cam, happy to be here. Thank you.
It's good to have someone from Huntsville on the show. We're new to the market there, and I think you guys and what you do will give us a pretty good indication of what's going on. So the pandemic shifted everyone out of their office, and the question has been, are they going to come back? Is office space going to rebound? Are we going to have just acres and acres and miles and tens of millions of square feet of unused office space post-pandemic as people are adopting a work-from-home attitude? Or was it just a flash in the pan and everything's going to return to normal? Tell me, James, what you're seeing.
Well, first off, let me say, Cam, thanks for having me on the show. And then two is we're a publicly traded office REIT. We're niche in that we're only office space. Yeah. We're about 20 million square feet total across the country where we are. So when the pandemic first occurred and everybody was going home, I mean, it raised our anxiety and worry pretty significantly. All of a sudden you see your buildings are these mass vacant things. It's kind of post-apocalyptic a little bit. Think of some of these zombie movies or something where everybody's just missing. So we made a couple key decisions up front that I think helped in the long term. Is number one is we made sure our facilities were safe. We added new HEPA filters, things like that. We had day porters coming and cleaning touch points. And then we continued to maintain our buildings in a Class A manner. So, sometimes some local owners or maybe they own one or two office buildings, when their tenant went home, well, they sent their maintenance guys home too. They said, well, if no one's going to be in the building, we're not even going to bother to, keep it up because it won't need it. And what you found is, HVAC systems started failing, plumbing issues started popping up. So when the tenants finally did return to the buildings, they weren't in as nice a condition as they were when they left.
Yeah.
Now, across the country, what we're really seeing is that Alabama is actually ahead of the curve when it comes to returning people to the office. And part of that is we're a more suburban market. We have more to offer. Some of these downtown areas, for instance, where we have buildings in D.C. or downtown Baltimore, for instance, there's some in some areas ghost towns because people don't want to return to those urban cores. Because what COVID, I really feel like did is reset people's expectation of what a work environment should be like. And part of what everyone has issues with is a long commute. And then what they want is if they do have to go through a long commute, they want it to be amenitized. And what happened is all these tenants went home. So the amenities that were there for those tenants in the downtown areas, like restaurants, gyms, those kind of things, they shut down because they had no customers anymore. So their tenants are returning to these areas, and there's really nothing to keep them there because they don't have those amenities, or they don't have them staffed as well as they should be. They're just not meeting the needs anymore. So those employees are starting to say, well, we're just not going to come back. We're going to find another opportunity where I can work remote.
So that's interesting. Let me interrupt you real quick. Are you suggesting that if these downtown cores, and we'll take Baltimore as an example, if the restaurants had remained open or had reopened, if the gyms had reopened, all the other, let's say, dry cleaners and things of that nature, which seem to be very important to an office environment to the survival or the amenities is the word you used of the office environment. If those were open again, the people may return to the office. It's not fear of pandemic. It's there's nothing to do here other than work. So we're not sure we're going to come back. Is that about it?
You're pretty spot on, Cam. And one of the things is that the health aspect is actually a very minor part of it. That's a minor concern. People are more worried now about their quality of life. They got exposed to something, not COVID, but they got exposed to, being at home, being closer to their neighborhoods and being able to run out and get lunch or whatever, and not have to deal with just headache causing traffic and stuff like that. That what we're learning is these employers really need to make it worth these employees' times to come back. I know like BOMA, which is Building Owners and Managers Association, they're a large trade association that monitors this kind of stuff. They did a survey and they found that about 80% of tenants are looking for owners that are looking beyond the status quo and trying to bring health and wellness amenities into the office. So what we've started to look at when we've designed our new buildings in Huntsville, where we've been very successful, is adding in gyms. We've got 3 restaurants in our office park. We make sure that they stayed open, and actually instead of taking a slump because of the service industry right now, they actually improved through COVID from a standpoint of we put the resources behind them to make sure they were going to be successful. We kept them open. We did things like abate their rent and extend their terms so that they could make it through that tough time, because we knew that the tenants had to have something to return to. And that's really been the key message out of all this.
So it's not a fear of health. It's I love the way you say it. They have to have something to return to. And you mentioned Huntsville leading the way due to the suburban nature of the city. The suburban nature of it, is it that the office places are in areas where the commute isn't so long and there are restaurants nearby because they didn't close due to their suburban nature? Tell me, correlate the suburban nature of Huntsville with the success you're seeing in Huntsville.
So we have a lot of benefits that maybe a Birmingham or even a Montgomery doesn't have, and that Huntsville is very, very focused on DOD, federal government. We're the Redstone Arsenal is the economic engine of our area. And honestly, it's one of the economic engine drivers of our state.
Yes.
It's responsible for something like 10% of the GDP. So it's a major metric mover. And a lot of that kind of work that the federal government requires from these contractors that are occupying these office buildings is they're secure in nature. So some of that work can't even be done at home. So we do have that going for us when it comes to returning people to the workplace. And then we do have beyond that is that the mayor, the governor, the county commission, everyone that worked together in Huntsville has really made a major focus on keeping the commute to work down low. The mayor brags about that we kind of have an 18-minute average commute time, pretty much get to anywhere in the city in that 18 minutes. And considering that Huntsville's actually, if in landmass, the 16th largest city in the United States, that's pretty remarkable. But they do a great job of managing the traffic flow. They were kind of ahead of the curve when it comes to getting the infrastructure right. And they used that downtime during COVID-19 when people were staying home to really reassess things and see where they can improve.
So what is, let's take a Baltimore. Let's take perhaps a Birmingham. We haven't talked much about Birmingham, a bigger infrastructure or core city. What are they going to do? What is Baltimore going to do? In my mind's eye, I see, like I said, tens of millions of square feet of office space that people no longer want to return to town. I suspect there are situations that may be similar in Birmingham. What are they going to do with all this?
Well, at the end of the day, obviously it's a personal decision with all the other options that you have nowadays. But we did a little survey of our tenants across our portfolio, about 20 million square feet in total. And we really found out that the owners, the managers, the executives of these companies, they affirm that in-person office is truly vital to operating their business over the long term. And it really came down to kind of what we term as the 3 C's. and it's where employees can collaborate. I know we have all the WebEx, the Zoom, and all that, but there's something about that in-person collaboration. It's where culture, that's another C. You have to be able to build a company culture. It's very tough to do that over a conference call. And then control, and I don't mean some kind of tyrannical, we're going to work them to death. We want to control what they're doing, but really quality control. And that really does kind of point back to culture, and that you want to make sure that everything coming out of your company is pretty succinct, and it's just the level of quality that you can expect. And it's just tough to do that when everyone's working remotely and working at home. Not to say it's impossible. If anything, I do think the birth of a hybrid workplace has been really, really good for American employers, because now they have a better way to deal with certain people that maybe have an immune system problem, and they really can't return to the office during a pandemic, or let's say a maternity leave type situation, or a child care. This hybrid workforce that came out of this has really improved things going forward. But what we're finding too in the office space is that in some cases, the need for office has grown, because it used to be, hey, we're going to get a massive cube farm and just shove everybody in there. Now they're going back to more private offices, so people have a little breathing area. And they, like I got back to earlier, they have to make it worth people coming back and spending time in the office. So they're adding larger areas so people don't have to be so crammed in there and stifled and in too much a close proximity, so that if there is another pandemic that comes around, maybe we'll be more prepared in the workplace.
Let's go to break, and when we come back from break, talk about the design of the office place. You alluded to it just now, and let's talk about what it's looking like post-pandemic due to health concerns, perhaps the need to separate people, as well as attractions. What does it take to get people in there? And I love your 3 C's: collaborate, culture, and control. What does that mean for the future design of the office place? You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. On the line today, James Lomax, Huntsville, Alabama. They manage 2 million square feet there in Huntsville, and learning about the future of office space post-pandemic. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culver House College of Business at the University of Alabama. We'll be right back.
This is Trey Langus with Transworld Business Advisors. I help business owners sell their businesses from mom and pop size to large mergers and acquisitions. We have a huge buyer database looking for quality businesses to buy right now. Confidentiality guaranteed. If you're a business owner considering an exit within the next few years, let's talk. Again, I'm Trey Langus. Find me at Transworld Business Advisors or Google my name.
Hey, this is Billy Duran. I'm the president of Threaded Fasteners. And when I'm not down at the Nut House, I'm listening to What's Working with Cam Marston. Now back to the show.
James Lomax is on the line with me, Vice President, Asset Management and Leasing for Corporate Office Properties Trust, COPT, a real estate investment trust. He manages 2 million square feet of Class A office space in the Huntsville area. We're talking about the future of office space. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culver House College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. James, prior to the break, we were talking a little bit about the design of the office place and what it's going to need to look like as we've learned, or perhaps are continuing to learn, the lessons from COVID. The lessons are, how do we keep people safe yet together? Another lesson is, how do we make this a place that people want to come versus have to come. What are you seeing in the design changes of how an office would look? From a cube farm back in the day, what's it going to look like tomorrow?
Yeah, Cam, the actual physical design of spaces has changed a good bit. We're starting to see some new things that we hadn't really seen pre-COVID, and they're really for the better, and they're being done so that people can plan and prepare in case something like COVID ever does happen again, or if it lingers on, et cetera, et cetera. But some of these things are kind of your entry and your flow patterns. So they're kind of being smart about how they're creating the hallways, the reception areas. They're creating other entrances, egresses to the space, so that people aren't necessarily having to cram up or hitting a kind of a log jam when they're entering a space or something like that. And we're also seeing a lot of people adding, for instance, huddle spaces. So if there is still kind of that quote unquote cube farm, they're starting to add more areas that an employee can go to be alone and to have that private area, so that they have an option to get away from that cube, so that they don't feel like they're just jam packed in there like sardines. But along pretty much most of what we've seen is really a kind of a return to more your physical walled off offices. And you're starting to see more and more employees kind of demand that as kind of that's part of what they want. If they're going to come back, they don't want to see a cube. They want to be able to have a hard-walled offices, or at least a larger cube, and maybe access to more common areas. We're putting them in some of our buildings as a kind of a common area amenity of gymnasiums, fitness centers. But some of these tenants themselves are actually adding them within their spaces. They're adding, a while back, break rooms kind of went away. They're more kind of a little coffee desk and maybe a refrigerator that you would walk up to. But some of these companies are getting back to a large break area where people can go and get away from the work for a moment, sit at a table with their friends, and just an area separate from their desk, rather than going and warming up their meal and walking back to their desk. They now have an option of being somewhere else. And then outdoor spaces are very important. That's something that really was kind of an afterthought a few years back, but there's been a renewed focus on adding a patio or a gazebo. Walking areas is very important. I think that's been one of the reasons we've been so successful with our development in Huntsville, is because we made a very concerted effort to add green spaces, a lake, and walking paths, so people can kind of take that moment, that pause, to kind of get away from their work, so that, it's a little bit different than working from home, because at home you may be pulled in a million different directions, whereas in the workplace it's just work, and then you can turn your brain off for a little while and take a nice break. Yeah.
Do you remember back in the day of the open floor plan at the office? Very democratized. Everybody had a similar desk, similar space. You could see what everybody was doing. There was a big push for that at some point.
Right.
And that sounds like it's gone, not to come back. Is that your understanding of it?
A little bit. And yeah, you said a good term, democratized. It's a little bit hierarchical is what we used to see, and that's kind of gone away a little bit. I mean, there's some companies, and some of them still exist, where, hey, if you're a manager level, you get X amount of square feet. When you move to director, it's X amount. Vice president gets in a certain amount. Some of that's gone away a little bit, and teams are more focused on flexibility. So they want to have an area where, if a vice president's in the office, they have an area they can go to be able to get their work done. But the same goes for, your mid-level manager. They have their own set area, but then they also have access to these amenities to be able to get their work done in different scenarios. They maybe don't need the large office that has the bookcase and the small conference room in it, but maybe they're in a pod that with 3 other offices that has access to a small conference room instead. So a lot of that is just a way of keeping things flexible, knowing that there may be a hybrid workplace where not 100% of your employees are going to be in all the time, but at some point, 100% of those employees are going to touch the office space throughout the week.
What is your opinion on levels of productivity based on the layout of the office space? So collaborate, control, culture and control. Collaborate would imply productivity. Is there a corollary between productivity and the layout, the design, perhaps even the color of the walls, the lighting of the office space?
Cam, I think it really depends on the industry. I think it really depends on what it is. An attorney, for instance, is going to probably be less successful sitting at a cube around 50 other attorneys than they would in an office that they can kind of close the door and bear down and study in. Maybe similar for an accountant, but you look at your more creative firms, maybe a marketing company, maybe a tech company, something where you have to have an immense amount of collaboration to be able to get a project across the finish line. An architectural company, for instance, it seems like they're more open to the quote unquote open layout, the collaborative layout, that works. But you're even seeing some more of these traditional companies do things that are a little bit out of the box. And part of that is just driven by they're trying to attract and retain talent.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. That's been a major thing about office space right now is they're more used as calling cards. I literally, I'm not going to say the name of the tenant, but we've had one of our existing tenants has flat out said, we don't pay as well as our competitors. So we need our office to be a really cool place where people want to come to work, because that's going to make us more competitive in the marketplace. And that's been an effective tool for them. I know of one client based in Petaluma, California, one of my clients, that has declared, essentially the CEO said, it's a publicly traded company, CEO said, based on our productivity during the pandemic, our numbers shot up in productivity. Our revenue shot up. Our profitability shot up. I would be, he said, the biggest hypocrite in the world to say we must return to the office place for us to do our work well, based on what I've seen. He is, from what I can understand, an extraordinary exception to the rule. Most of them, it sounds like, from what you've told me, are saying for us to be successful as a company, we need people together at least some portion of the time during the day. Are you aware of any other organizations like the one I told you about in Petaluma that have said, we're not coming back?
It kind of depends on the industry. And then it depends on what their goals are. And a lot of times I can't point to any specifics. But what I can tell you is, we experienced this maybe in 2021, where we're talking to a tenant, they're looking at 50,000 square feet, and then it shrinks because then all of a sudden they're down looking at 15,000 square feet because they made a corporate decision that we're going to really lean in and give this hybrid thing a go, where we just need a place where somebody can go once a week and have some meetings, and the rest of the week they're going to work at home. I cannot say if it's been effective for them or not. Obviously, I sell office space for a living, so I think that the majority of these companies are finding it that they're better fit in the office. But I think as an office owner, which is what my company is, we're seeing a benefit just in that we help these tenants foster environments where they can create relationships with their employees, and that is so key in retention of these employees, rather than somebody that's sitting at home, they log in, they talk to some people. They could be doing that for any company. But when you're coming to an office every day, you're really creating an environment that is all about relationships. And that's going to help you be competitive over the long term. And then honestly, we're able to help them on things like inflation and supply chain issues. Just with the amount of work that we do, some of these companies are experiencing similar things. So we're always looking at ways that we can help our tenants have a competitive advantage over these companies that are maybe going 100% remote. Yeah,
I can see it. And culture, I agree with you in that personal relationships, they can be perhaps sustained for a little while remotely, but to be redeveloped, recommitted, and to deliver the culture, the unique culture of a specific office place, it is, I'm willing to say, nearly impossible to do it remotely. You can keep it alive, but you cannot recreate it unless you're together. And I believe in that. James Lomax, Vice President, Asset Management and Leasing. His company is Corporate Office Properties Trust, COPT. James, how can people find you if they want to learn more or hear what you've got available in Huntsville right now?
Yeah, it's very easy. It's just www.redstonegateway.com. That's the project we manage in Huntsville. You can reach me at james.lomax@copt.com.
Very good. James, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, Cam, I enjoyed it.
We'll go to break. After break, we'll talk about the co-working space and how it's reacting to a post-COVID world, I understand demand is surging. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, Culverhouse College of Business, University of Alabama.
Life insurance is one of those subjects that make people want to change the subject rather than admit they probably don't have enough. I'm State Farm agent Allison Horner, and that's why I focus on how the benefits of life insurance actually live on by asking people to think in terms of life without having to sell the house insurance, or life without having to give up college insurance. Find out how the benefits of life insurance can live on for your family. Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, and get to a better state with State Farm.
Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. The final segment of this show that's content related, we're going to look at the extraordinary rise and changing world of the co-working space. It has had a it was very popular prior to COVID, but post-COVID, it's had a resurgence. I'm in the studio now with Stacy Wellborn and Johnny Gwinn. They're the co-owners of the Container Yard here in Mobile, one of Mobile's premier co-working space. And we're going to talk to them about what they've seen in tenants, in clients, whatever the terminology may be. Johnny, Stacy, thank you so much. Welcome back to What's Working, Johnny, and welcome to What's Working, Stacy.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Tell us, let's first make sure everybody's clear on the definition of a co-working space, because when I bring my guests in here to use this studio, many of them aren't familiar with it. So let's start there. Stacy.
So co-working as a concept is about 10 years old and really started out in California and is built on the idea of people coming together from different types of businesses and efforts to work in a shared space and ultimately creating community. Because often when you're a freelancer or a solopreneur, you're at home with your dogs and cats and don't have humans to speak to. So that's really where co-working came. The concept of shared offices, of course, has been around forever. Lawyers have shared, houses for offices and such for ages. But the idea of co-working really is about creating that community
of different types of businesses under one roof.
Yes.
Yes. So give me a quick, if you will, overview of your space. How many different businesses do you have here, and what types of community engagements do you foster, which I assume is a model for all the other co-working spaces across the state?
Yeah, so we have everything from single freelance graphic design artists to corporate businesses where this is their mobile office space, and they may be located in Houston or Dallas or Atlanta, whatever that may be, but their person is based here. So we probably have 65 members representing about 55 businesses, and everything from creatives, podcasters, photographers, graphic designers, to we have a guy in the pile driving business.
Which is exactly what you'd expect.
We have insurance, accounting. We've got a couple of nonprofits, some realtors. So really a variety of folks here.
And how do you facilitate the community, which is one of the fingerprints of co-working space?
Well, I always say a co-working space is not a place to work. It's a way to work. So the idea is you have a space to work, you have the internet, you have all that thing, a flat fee, but it's the idea of the organic networking that happens when you're getting a coffee up at the front. You meet somebody and all of a sudden you realize, wait, we could do business together. So the idea of it not just having a place to work, it's a way to work, and it's also a way to be in a group of people to do networking while you're doing your job. And so it's, like I said, it's a place. And we also create programming where we'll do best practices for business. And, Jason Will does a mastermind for social media here. Mm-hmm. So for the members, and it's open to the public sometimes. So the idea is it's not only a place to work, it's also a place to learn to work. So
COVID drove everybody home for a period of time, and you guys have seen a resurgence post-COVID. Tell me a little bit about what the demand has been here for a co-working space post-COVID.
We've definitely seen it pick up. And a trend we've seen, and also this is happening nationally, is we've gotten more corporate folks. Yeah. As I mentioned, your office may be in Atlanta, but you live in Mobile. You need a place to go that's quiet, secure, has great internet, and it represents the company, right? That's not your kitchen.
Right.
So we've had more corporate folks come in. We've also had just more new businesses and folks that are coming to Mobile. I mean, the marketplace here is just growing. And as new businesses come, co-working is a way that they can get into the market easily, low dollar entry point until they get settled in the marketplace and maybe then go find a permanent solution.
How did COVID change that? I mean, what is the COVID factor here?
Well, before COVID, we had a harder time telling people we exist and where we are, and people didn't know what it was. And since COVID, people are coming to us. They just Google co-working and they find us and they come in. And so people are using the term now. It's a much more normalized term. And they're also coming from other communities. They're seeing them in other communities. They're hearing about it. Of course, the WeWork, which is the largest in the world, had a meteoric rise and fall and became a little bit more of a, again, a known quantity in society in general.
Yeah, Johnny?
And flexibility is the big thing. I think you might be hearing from commercial real estate people and developers that the new word is flexibility. What can I do with a building that's been used a certain way for 30 years? Well, remote working has changed that. Co-working is the ultimate in flexibility. We are month to month. You don't sign a huge lease with us. You don't have to deal with Alabama Power. You don't have to deal with Comcast because it's all done here, right? It's a flat fee. So it gives you that ability to quickly be in a downtown prestigious address. You've got an office space. You have a place to work. No one needs to know this isn't your full office. Right. It gives you the ability to look like we've been here a while. We're established. We have that prestigious address. And some people just need a mobile address because they do work with the county. They do work with the city. They do work with the state. So we have a lot of corporate people, as we're saying, that we're more interest, not just a solopreneur, not just that side hustle person that's kind of known as I would say the avatar or the archetype for a person that you see in a co-working space. Now it's becoming where I think a lot of corporations are saying, we have 6,000 square feet. People aren't coming back. We're not using its wasted space. We're going to have an issue with inflation. We're going to probably have a profit margin will go down. Well, one of the quickest way for us to increase profit margin is to cut our overhead. Well, office space being one of the ways to cut your overhead, we are a way for us to be incredibly flexible, not only for the workspace, but also for your financing because of the way that we are done with the idea you can cut your overhead and also you can project it out because we're a flat fee.
Yeah. Well, what about all this other office space? What do you hear in the marketplace across the state of buildings in, let's say, downtown Birmingham, downtown Huntsville, Montgomery, whatever it may be, saying they're not coming back. We're going to adopt a co-working model because it just, of all the features you two have just listed, is that what you're hearing amongst the other co-working spaces is how do we do this?
Actually more from the realtors, the commercial real estate folks and owners that they're looking. I've had people reach out to me and I've had meetings locally about transforming a traditional 10,000, 15,000 square foot space a floor in a building to a co-working venue. Well, they don't know how to run a co-working facility. So we're looking at partnerships. And, I think that's a way we can expand our business. And I think it's going to be a win-win for the real estate person who's got this empty space doing nothing.
Is it reasonable to say that as more space becomes available, more people will seek co-working spaces? Or do you think there's a limit on the co-worker tenant or client?
Well, it's not for everybody, I will say. I mean, you have to come and make sure. That's why we like the month-to-month idea, because if it doesn't work out for you, you just don't pay the second month, right? But the idea is you have to come try it out, but it works for some, not for all. But we have a big enough space, container yard is a big enough space to where we can be flexible with the idea of like you need 2 offices, if they're private, we can do that. You need an open area, we can do that as well. So the idea is almost like you test drive it, almost like a car, because you are changing, like an HR person and an office manager is changing the way things are, because it's not a private office with, I would say, cubicles, right? You are coming into an area that's shared with many, many companies. There are different sets of rules, and noise being one. We have to make sure your ringer is not on one, because if everybody had their ringer in that space, it'd be like a call center. We have to be very careful with, if you're having very long-term conversations on a phone, you're not going to need to be in a public open area. You probably need to look into a private office area. So you have to look at what the strengths are of your company, what the weaknesses are of your company, what you need to do as a purpose for a company. And the idea is, does that space fit your purpose? Let's
talk about the market, though. Is more co-working spaces going to create more demand for co-working spaces?
I think 100%. I think, rising tide rises all boats, right? So since we were actually the second co-working space created here in Mobile, the first is actually no longer open. But since there's 3 others, I think, in town, and with more, again, the awareness of the concept, became greater. So people came looking, and then it really becomes a matter of style. We have a very creative, colorful, kind of casual space. There are others that are more formal or smaller or larger. And really you do have to come test them out and see what works for how you like to work.
Are there rules around co-working spaces that says if your team is 5 people, you just can't fit in here? You just can't do what you do in here?
It has to do with the people. 5 people that work in a certain, let's just say, accountants might be like quiet as a mouse.
Right.
But if you have 5 people in a marketing company, they're very outgoing, and it's a much different type of energy, right, between those 5 people. You need to find a place. Even if you're doing a traditional commercial real estate, you need to find a place that fits, again, the purpose and the energy of your team.
If someone's listening out there and they're in one of the 6 markets we're broadcasting in, and they're looking at co-working spaces, should they expect the collegiality and the programming that you all do? Is that unique to this space, or is that part of the model?
I think it's part of the model. And again, each one's going to be a little bit different. We do a lot of social programming because we want people to get to know each other on a personal level before they do business. It isn't, I tell people, don't come here to sell me insurance. Come here to be my friend, and then maybe I'll buy some insurance from you.
Right, very good.
And everybody's going to have their own vibe that they set. And some have, honestly, no vibe. I think we have a whole lot of vibe. So it's an individual choice.
But it's also what you put into it is what you get out of it, like anything else. And if you want to just be here and come and work and be as quiet as a mouse, we have that as well. But you also have people that take over programming and create their own programming here. And one of the last things that I want to say is going back to what we're hearing. I'm getting more and more people who own, especially real estate companies, and own buildings, who are now saying, how do we convert what I have that's been traditional? I had 38 real estate people, let's just say in Huntsville, Alabama. They're not coming in the office. I have 7,000 square feet. Is there a way for me to modify what I have? And can we create a co-working space? And I said, sure, you can modify any space, but you can't just turnkey call your traditional office space a co-working space. It doesn't quite work that way. You have to have kind of like the playbook and consult with someone that has a co-working space, so you create that community feel as well as the square footage.
Yeah. Johnny Gwinn, Stacy Wellborn, how can they find you? We're at the Container Yard. How can they find you?
Our website is containeryardworks.com, and you can do a Google search for Container Yard Co-working in Mobile, Alabama.
This is where I record all these episodes that you hear when I'm in person, is in a corner of the Container Yard, which is also this podcast recording or just recording studio. Thank you both so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this break for segment 5 and the recap. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. It's brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the University of Alabama.
This is Trey Langus with Transworld Business Advisors. You've worked for years to grow and build your business, and now you're considering an exit strategy. Selling your business can be intimidating and complex. Let our local team at Transworld Business Advisors help you. We are the largest business brokerage in the world, and I will personally and confidentially guide you through this process. I'm Trey Langus. Find me at Transworld Business Advisors or Google my name.
Hey, this is Bill Wasden, and when I'm not in court or in the office, I'm listening to What's Working with Cam Marston. Now, back to the show.
It's amazing how COVID taught all of us to reevaluate our lives in so many different ways. I think we'll be talking about this for the rest of my life for sure. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate and the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. I'm Cam Marston. Thank you. Been an interesting show. Want to thank Johnny and Stacy for their time, letting me use their studio again. It's so comfortable in there. Johnny does a wonderful job making everybody feel comfortable. And I want to thank James Lomax. We gave him actually, it was the Alabama Center for Real Estate. It was Grayson Glaze who I called and said, hey, Grayson, I need somebody up in Huntsville to interview for this. That's his world, Grayson's world. He knows all these people. He calls James Lomax. James instantly says, yes, I'll be happy to help. He was easy to work with and gave us some great content. And the point, I guess, that James made, which I think is really interesting, is people aren't going to commute like that anymore, he says. And I don't have any reason to doubt him. Those long commutes that we had, if you live in Mobile, you don't have a long commute. You may think you do, but I assure you, compared to Washington, compared to Atlanta, compared to so many places, you don't have a long commute. The people just simply aren't going to do that anymore. And they found that working from home, they don't have to do the commute, and there's no reason to travel so far to be in an office just to have the job when they can do it there. And the cities with the suburban office spaces tend to be doing best in regards to leasing this office space post-COVID. Again, I think we'll be talking about the impacts of COVID. Gosh knows we've only begun talking about the impacts from COVID for the rest of our lives, and that's not an exaggeration. We'll always be pointing back to what we learned here, what changed in this time, and office space design being that. And now I remember, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here, I'm watching my time here, can't go on forever, walking into an office with M&M Mars back in the day. And it was an open office plan. And I thought it just looked strange. And they were thinking, yeah, they told me this is the new design. This is what facilitates creativity. And what we're learning is we're going back away from that design. I wonder if we're going back away permanently, or there will be a new style of open office space in the future that is designed to facilitate creativity. I don't know. The co-working space, folks, if you haven't been in one, check it out. They're pretty cool. They've got their own vibe. They've got their own energy. They're worth taking a look at. That's all for this week, everybody. If you want a free chapter of my new book called What Works, go to my website, cammarston.com. You'll find that chapter offer at the bottom of the page. Show is produced by John Thompson with Ion Digital. We'll have another show next week. Show is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate.